Bank bailout austerity. Could one of the world's newest disciplines, neuroscience, hold the keys to the mysteries of the mind? Joining me now is a professor of behavioral neuroscience at UCLA, Dean Buonamano, whose new book, Your Brain is a Time Machine, unlocks the ability for the human brain to comprehend time and space. Dean, welcome to Going Underground. Before we get to how our brain is a time machine, just tell me how universal are culture's attitudes to time?
Well, time, since the dawn of man, has really been a fundamental problem that humans have faced, and also that makes us very unique. So humans are unique. I think one thing that separates us from other animals is our ability to think about time, to reminisce about the past, and perhaps more importantly, to imagine the future, imagine a potential future. For example, I think one of the most important technological innovations of human beings ever was probably agriculture, right? And that we tend to not fully appreciate that, but the act of planting a seed is something temporal, right? We're doing that for the future. It's not for the present reward now, but for something that we will reap in 6 months or a year.
And every society depended on it, which is why our language somehow reflects that history.
Our ability to understand space seems to have been borrowed in the same sense we think of left or right, we think of past or future. And one of the pieces of evidence that people use to support that theory is that when you and I talk about time, we often use spatial metaphors. We'll say, I'm looking forward in the future to meet you, or in hindsight, that was a bad idea of mine. And so we tend to spatialize time. And normally the future is in front of us, and the past is behind us. But some cultures actually do the opposite. So in some cultures, like the Aymara, the natives of Bolivia, the past is in front of them and the future behind them. So tomorrow I will visit you. And that's a bit weird, but if you think about it, the future is unknown. We can't see it. And the past, we already know. So in a way, that makes a bit more sense.
You present one central dichotomy in the book, which is what you call presentism and eternalism. Just describe how central that is, because that's two very different views of time.
So now, this is a much deeper philosophical question that also interacts with physics. So this is a deep question of what is time? Okay, so fine, we imagine time, we think about the future, we reminisce about the past, but what is time at the deepest sense of the word? And there's sort of two views of this. So one is we call eternalism, and there the past and the future are equally real. So one way to put it is that now is to time as here is to space. So just like you and I are here, but we accept that viewers and everybody else are other points in space, there's other versions of you and me, if you will, at other points in time.
Which of course allows time travel.
Time travel, so this is sort of what enables the talk of time travel. And
meanwhile, though, there's presentism.
And then there's presentism, in which under presentism, only the present is real. So the past disappears into the void and no longer exists except in our memory. And the future is wide open and yet to come, some configuration of the universe that has not yet happened, but only the present is real. And in physics, the sort of more accepted view is actually the most counterintuitive one, which is eternalism, which is called the block universe. And so the standard view in physics is actually that the past, present, and future are equally real, which is a bit incompatible with our daily experience, which makes it very hard to understand what we feel as the flow of time.
At least as far as neuroscience, the state of the art is at the moment, we can say something, though, about how the brain itself tells time, no matter what capitalism may have done to upset circadian rhythms.
Right.
It's been one of the most accurate timekeepers, you say, until the 17th century.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. The human brain is very different from like the clocks on our wrists. The clocks on our wrists are a product of astoundingly successful technology, right? But the human brain has been telling time through multiple different mechanisms. So we have one way to tell circadian rhythm. This is what you just referred to in that, because we have...
What is a circadian rhythm?
So the circadian rhythm is what drives our behaviors to go to bed, to get up, to eat, and we know a lot about that. There's a part in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, sort of deep in the basement of your brain, that undergoes these 24-hour oscillations.
For all those 0 hours contracts workers out there whose circadian rhythms are being upset,
Yeah.
this is occurring within the cells of or within the nuclei of neurons in the brain?
So the circadian clock, indeed, is working in the individual cells and neurons throughout your body, actually. And it works because the DNA makes a protein, and that protein in turn inhibits the synthesis of that exact protein. So you have a cycle. And as you say, people who work in certain professions in which they don't have regular hours, be it airline pilots or employees in 0-hour contracts, if that's affecting their circadian rhythm, yeah, that has absolutely, it has health consequences for the long term.
What about, two alarming bits right at the end of the book. One of them, you argue that humans are not evolutionarily suited to long-term planning. Perhaps a reason why capitalism is so successful, the short-term financing, when it comes to ecology and so on?
A lot of the problems we face as individuals and as society, I would argue, arise from our temporal myopia, our not acting enough or thinking enough about the future. And so at the personal level, whether that's, say, credit card debt or not working out or not eating healthy. So yes, I think that while the human brain is unique in its ability to think about the long-term future, we have to get better at it. We have to improve our temporal myopia by acting more in the present to improve the future.
And then just finally, the arguably most frightening element, the more you research into the subject, your field as a scholar, you talk at the end about human free will. Now, what is the state of neuroscience when it comes to what human free will, the cornerstone of freedom itself, is?
Yeah. A lot of things you and I are doing are happening unconsciously, and some of that bubbles up, if you will, to conscious perception. So some of what the unconscious mind is doing creates a narrative that we think of as consciousness. So in my view, I think
But there's a time delay between the two
there has
things.
to be, right?
You don't say criminal courts should have to judge the time delay before a murder, for instance.
So there's absolutely a time delay in that if in a way we know there's a time delay, or one of the pieces of evidence for this time delay is they can do experiments where they ask, say, so move your finger whenever you want. And they can measure when you move your finger, but they can measure in your brain before you move your finger. So in a way, they know you're going to move your finger, the experimenters, before you actually know or move your finger. So there's brain signals or signatures that precede or seem to precede voluntary action. So I think what that's telling us is that free will is probably best interpreted as the feeling the unconscious mind generates of having made a decision. Now, what this means to our actions is I think people need to embrace the fact that whether your decisions arise from the unconscious brain or from the conscious brain, it doesn't matter. It's who you are. You are your unconscious brain and your conscious brain. And that's who I am. So if the decision comes from my unconscious or conscious, it doesn't matter. It's still me.
Professor Dean Rodamano, thank you. And that's it for the show.